What's up guys, I'm Rich from Spray Black Studios and today I'm going to show you a new way of painting Crimson Fist Space Marines. So in my Flesh Tearers Blade Guard Veteran video, I asked for a few suggestions on what models, what chapters to attempt, and one of them that I received really piqued my interest. Whilst I'll happily admit that I've got a burning hatred for the Imperial Fists, and mainly their Primarch, Rogel Dawn, the Crimson Fists, their successor, have been one that I've always had a bit of a soft spot for. Now when I first got into 40k, one of my better memories as a kind of early teenager was just sitting there flicking through codexes and White Dwarfs, looking at the amazing artwork and obviously just looking at the pictures. One of the ones that really jumped out at me though was the 3rd edition Space Marine Codex, and that codex, fairly iconic now, shows a shot of the Crimson Fists. But it dawned on me that actually after probably about 20 years I've never actually painted a Crimson Fist. Well, I thought about it. I did a little test scheme and I thought, you know what? When's a better time than now? So this is the model I'll be working on today. Obviously, we had to choose something with a nice big power fist. Having primed him with Vallejo's black surface primer, I'm going to give him a nice even base coat of Vallejo steel blue. I'm using an airbrush for this, but it's not essential. With a couple of good thin coats you can get a good coverage over the black, even using a brush. So now once that is all dry, I need to give it some depth, so I'm just going to start building up some highlights. Now like in the Blade Guard Veteran video I did, I'm going to do this by successive dry brush layers. Firstly starting off with a fairly heavy zenithal dry brush using Citadel's Alatok Blue. Then I'll go to Citadel's Thunderhawk Blue and apply a much lighter dry brush layer. Again, keeping that zenithal style, dry brushing from top to bottom and just trying to apply paint on those down strokes of the brush. Now for me the Crimson Fists shouldn't just be a straight blue colour. I'm going to add a nice heavy wash across the model using Druchii Violet. This wash will give a nice purple tint to the armour and layer in some purple into those shadows. Now since this guy's a Crimson Fist, then really he needs to have a Crimson Fist. I'll use Gal Vorback as a base coat for both the power fist and for his other hand. Once built up with some highlights, this will look real striking against that blue armour. For the highlights on the red, I'm going to use Corn Red and Mephiston Red. When layering on the Corn Red, at the moment it looks quite bright, but Corn Red is one of those colours that really does tend to dry a little bit differently to how it looks wet. Once the highlights are down, we're going to finish off the red areas with a little Drakenhof Nightshade wash. This will dull down that red a little bit, but it will tie it in nicely to that blue armour and give some lovely shadows. For the weapons, I'll give them all a coat of Vallejo's Game Air Black. I'm also going to do this to prepare all the areas that we're going to be putting the metallics on. Now all those areas have been blocked in, I'm going to grab my new favourite metallic. Using Vallejo's Metal Colour Magnesium, I'll give a nice smooth coat to all of those metallic areas. This paint reminds me so much of the old iconic Citadel Bolt Gun Metal in tone, but unlike Bolt Gun Metal it goes on super smooth and with great coverage even without thinning it too much. To give some highlights onto these metallics, I'll use the chrome paint from the same range. And whilst I'm not going to go with a full true metallic metal feel, I'll pick out those upper areas of the shoulder pad trim just to give it a little bit more of a shiny look. To give those metallic areas a bit more depth, I'll add a slightly thinned down wash of Army Painter Dark Tone. Nuln Oil would work perfectly well here too, but I just love the finish that the dark tone gives. For the bolt rifle and bolt pistol, I'm going to do a full edge highlight using the Citadel's Dark Reaper, making sure I thinned it nicely just to make it easier to keep that nice steady line. As a top highlight, I'll then go to the trusty Thunderhawk Blue, Using these two highlight paints, give a black and almost bluish finish, and it ties it in beautifully with that blue armour. Now we're getting down to the details. For the two scrolls on the model, I'll give them a base coat of Rakkar flesh, and then I'm going to attempt a bit of simple freehand. Using Corvus black, I'll do a little bit of writing on it. Now I've not added any company markings to this guy, but for the scroll work, I'm going to write in the name of the second company captain, Alves. Using a nicely thinned paint, a nicely pointed brush tip, and a steady hand, I'll trace in the letters using as few emotions as possible, with a bit of Corvus black. Now I'll admit there are definitely better ways to do the script on these areas, and this may well be a video I do in the future, but for a quicker job such as this Crimson Fist, this will definitely suffice. To make the scroll work look a little bit more aged, I'll add a quick wash of Agrak Surfshade. This brown wash just pulls in those corners and just makes it look a little bit more tatty. So whilst most of this model's armour is quite plain and quite simple, over his right shoulder he has this pretty ornate tassel. So to make this a little bit more eye-catching, I'm going to go for a nice regal gold. Starting with Retributor armour as a base, and then giving it a nice wash with Reikland Flesh Shade, I think this will really stand out. For the leather of his pouches and his holster, I'm going to use a bit of a tried and tested technique. I'm going to start off with a base coat of Rhinox hide. With a mix of Rhinox hide and Steel Legion drab, I'll add an edge highlight and a few little scratches here and there just to give the pouches a little bit of wear and tear. To finish it off, I'll grab some pure Steel Legion drab and just pick out the very corners of those leather areas and just add a few more little scratches. For the face, I'm going to go with a simplified version of Darren Latham's method. I'm going to start off with a nice smooth base coat of Bugman's Glow. I'm then going to build up those highlights through a mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone, and then up to pure Cadian Flesh Tone on those very top highlights such as his nose, the top of his cheekbones and his forehead. This is where the light would generally catch, and these are the bits that you need to accentuate. For his hair, I'm going to go in and touch up that black base coat just to tidy up the bits that I've accidentally got flesh tone on. And while that's drying, I'm just going to go in and paint up all that machinery around his bionic eye. And for this, I want to tie it in with the armour plating, so we're going to use the same colour build-up that we used for his armour. Starting off with Steel Blue, adding an edge highlight in with a Latok Blue, and then using Thunderhawk Blue for those real tiny spot highlights on the corners and at the edges. So now the base coat on his hair is dry, I'm going to be super lazy and just give it a light dry brush with Dawnstone and then a wash with Army Painter Dark Tone. This gives it a little bit of a greyish tint to it, makes him look a bit more distinguished, but mainly it just picks out that texture and stops it from looking flat. Again, to keep the colour palette as similar as I can, I'll paint up the lens of the bionic eye and the cabling with an initial base coat of Gal Vorbak and then build this up with the highlights of Corn Red. This will just tie it in nicely with the red on those fists. For his eyes, I'll pop some Corvus Black into the recesses to give a bit of definition, and then using a bit of Ulthuan Grey and Corvus Black, I'll paint the whites and the pupils of his eye. This is a very simple method for painting eyes, which I tend to do on just battle ready minis. If you want a simple way to improve this, then if you have a nice steady hand, then pop a little blue dot down before you paint on the pupil, and it will give him some nice blue eyes, and we all know the ladies love blue eyes. That's it for the painting. So a little dab of super glue to attach the head to the body and then the mini to the base that I'd made earlier, and we have one finished Crimson Fist Sergeant. Following the painting, as you can possibly see, I've also added a little bit of stubble to his face by using a very thin blue wash, and I've also used a bit of Vallejo weathering pigment on his boots just to really tie it into this base.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. As mentioned, prior to doing a test model for this, I've never painted a Crimson Fist, and to be honest, at this point, I really don't know why. I'm slightly concerned that I may end up doing an army of them, and I definitely don't need any more projects.
Now, a few people have commented on social media about the method that I use to do the highlighting. It's the method that I've used on this model, I used on my flesh tearers, and I've been using on that entire project. Now, a few people have said, well, why not just edge highlight it? Do it the way that Eavy Metal do it. Well, for me, this gives a particular sort of feeling, a particular sort of look, that kind of rough around the edges, a little bit grimy look to it. But actually, it's also quite easy to do and a lot less time consuming. This method, particularly for those that maybe struggle to get a clean edge highlight, whether it's just lack of experience or maybe whether you suffer from tremors, this method allows you to get a nice effective edge highlight without the need of constantly going back and cleaning things up, of having to kind of go through and correct your mistakes. With this, yeah, it seems a little bit around the houses in how you build it up and then obviously washing back down again, but it's an easy method to do and certainly for me gives good results. So having done the Blood Angel before and now this Crimson Fist, I'm starting to feel like maybe a little project's coming. I think possibly I'm going to end up doing an array of minis, all from various chapters, all painted in this particular style. So I think I'll probably end up doing one from each of the first founding legions. Yes, even Imperial Fists and Ultramarines for the sake of completionism, even though it will hurt me to do it. But I'd quite like to get some of the more exotic successor chapters in there as well. So please, if you've got any suggestions, stick them down in the comments down below. Maybe they're going to be ones that I've never heard of. Maybe they're going to ones that are going to push my skill level a little bit. So if you've enjoyed this video, then please give it a like down below and please feel free to share it to your friends, stick it on social media, wherever you want to put it. Just helps the channel a little bit, pushing those views up, but also pushes the reach out a little bit, gets it to a few more people that may never have seen my videos before. I'd also appreciate it if you took a look at that big red subscribe button down below, with a couple of interesting collaborations planned and a particularly interesting diorama video coming up very soon. They're ones that you won't want to miss out on. So thanks again, and remember guys, if all else fails, spray it black and start again.